my picture on the wall, that's a very special picture. Those are buddies of mine from West Point. There's a picture of my father there. He joined the 10th Cavalry. He was a Buffalo soldier. The pictures, they're triggers for stories, they're triggers for memories and stories. And they're stories of service. Service that makes our country what it is, that I think perhaps can propel young men and women to pick up the flag and carry on and continue to serve.
I want to tell you about a man named Gary Steele. In 1966, Steele was a cadet at West Point and a sophomore tight end on Army's football team.
And Steele's in the clear for another Army touchdown.
When he stepped on the field at Michie Stadium, he became the first African American to play varsity football at West Point, effectively breaking the color barrier at the United States Military Academy.
I remember the photograph being taken, and it was, unfortunately, it happened to be at the end of the game that we lost to Vanderbilt. That photo and the overall meaning is really significant to me because I think back on my father. My father came out of Harlem, born in 1922, and he entered the service, and his first duty station was West Point, training the horses and taking the horses over to the cadets. To think that 25 years later, Dad and Mom had not one, but two sons who were cadets at West Point. How amazing must that have been for he and my mother, who just a few years earlier, there were things that they could never have done. They couldn't even think of it, but they dreamed it and it happened.
Your guidepost stands out like a tenfold beacon in the night. Duty, honor, country.
Duty, honor, country. That's what it was all about. Everything we did revolved around those words. There's so many words out of so many things that we learned or were exposed to at the Academy, but the words out of the West Point Cadet Prayer. There's a little phrase that goes, Lord, make me to choose the harder right rather than the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole truth can be won. The words didn't sink in initially, but over time, the words kind of grew, took root in me, and it helped me decide who I was going to be.
For us, for our family, it's more than just words. It's something that we've lived by for as long as I've been alive, that I'm passing on to my kids, and hopefully they can pass on to their kids, because it gets to the core of you as a human being and as a person. You know, whatever you can do to always choose the harder right and never choose the easier wrong. If you stay on that path, you're going to be successful.
And that is the most important thing that he taught us, that I am making sure that I pass on to my kids. Where sometimes it's hard to make the right decision, but when you think of that cadet prayer, at the end, it's always an easy decision, the harder right, not the easier wrong. And I will never, ever forget. I'm so thankful to my dad for giving us that.
So I graduate from West Point, and I meet this young lady, and we're enthralled with each other. And about 18 months after graduation, we get married. I think it was interesting because obviously I'm black and my wife is white. And we were married in 1971. Times were different in 1971. We were in love. We knew that things were going to be tough, but for us, this was the harder right. The easier wrong would have been to dismiss it and say, well, you know, people won't think good about this. But we didn't choose to do that. And because we didn't choose to do that, our lives are what they are today. We have 3 wonderful, wonderful children. You know, you talk about your legacy. Our legacy is not anything that I did. Our legacy is what you can see. And what you can see are our 3 children. What you can see are our 5 grandchildren and what they will give to the world. So we chose the harder right, in my view.
So my fondest memory of my father and grandfather was my senior year in high school, and my dad was stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and we lived in the Rookery, which is the oldest continually occupied house in Kansas. A number of military officers have lived there, including MacArthur and his mom, and my dad was lucky enough to be in that long line, so he was stationed there.
It was 1992. It was a dedication of the Buffalo Soldier Monument. Colin Powell was the keynote speaker.
From the earliest days of our nation, African Americans answered the call to arms in defense of America whenever that call came.
And my grandfather was there, and we were sitting on the porch. My grandfather got a little emotional. We were talking, and he said, you know, I was stationed here in 1942, and as a black soldier, I could not walk down this road. And now, fast forward 50 years later, and my son, as a colonel, lives in the Rookery. And he said, I couldn't be more proud of you and your family. So that's always stuck with me, and it's one of my favorite memories of my dad and my grandfather.
I remember his eyes tearing up that particular day, that particular moment as he was describing that. When I start thinking about these things, I get choked up and I get emotional because I can only imagine what he and my mother and many people across our country endured. His spirit has always been with me. So everything that I am, I owe to him and my mother for what they have given me to become who I am. When I look around and I see the people who have been in combat, in my 23 years, I was never in a combat zone. When I see the people who served, who put their lives in danger in the military and the first responders, I see those are people whose pictures deserve to be on the wall. I scratch my head about mine, but it's there that I'm very proud of it. When I see my father's picture on the wall, yes, that's service.
My dad chose to serve in a way that I think is admirable, humbly, and with pride. It was never about my dad and what he did or his rank or any accolades. It was about the troops.
You know, when I see pictures of the colonel on the wall and see some of the pictures of my grandfather on the wall, it's a tremendous amount of pride. It's an emotional thing for me because I've always thought of my dad as the greatest man I know, one of my heroes, and to be able to see him up there and him honored with all of these other spectacular military members and first responders that maybe somebody outside of our little circle can see what Colonel Steele did for this country. It's just, it's humbling, it's emotional, it just fills me with pride.
When I look around, I see America. I see what makes us great, because these are the men and women that are holding it all together, working together to serve, to work to something that is greater than us as individuals.